Hi, this is Mark Wright, pastor of Evers Road Christian Church, and this is the pre-recorded sermon for Sunday, February the 13th. And this pre-recording is for those of you who are a part of our Evers Road family, and for whatever reason you're unable to attend. You may be traveling, you may be in another state, you may be quarantined, you may be experiencing poor health. Whatever the reason, we want to say that we miss you. We're praying for you, we love you, and we look forward to the day when you'll be with us again in Sunday morning adult worship. I'm in a series now entitled Mastering the Love Languages, Improving Relationships. And there are 5 love languages. What are these 5 love languages? Love language number 1 is gifts. You can show people you love them when you give gifts with a sincere heart, of course. That applies to all of these love languages. Number 2 is acts of service. Serving others is a love language. Doing simple things to help others is a love language. Number 3 is words of affirmation, words of kindness, and that is what we're going to talk about today. Words of kindness, words of affirmation as a love language. Number 4 is spending quality time together. That's next Sunday. And number 5 is affectionate physical touch. Now, I want to give credit to Gary Chapman, who wrote the book, The 5 Love Languages. However, I'm only taking the 5 headings from him. I'm not using any of the other material from his book. In fact, I haven't read his book in 30 years, but these love languages have always been a powerful blessing to me in my marriage and my relationships. The insight is very profound. But I'm getting my supporting material from God's Word. Without looking at Gary Chapman's book, I'm digging into God's Word to see what it says on each one of these themes. And today's theme is words of affirmation. Now, I want to say this is so serious and so important, and we need this. You need this. The words that come out of your mouth are powerful. And the words that come out of your mouth are important, because the words that come out of your mouth will either nurture and help grow and bless your relationships, or the words that come out of your mouth will be damaging and destructive to your relationships. Let me put it like this. Marriage. Let's take marriage, for instance. Whether you end up in the divorce court or whether you have a happy, healthy, lifelong marriage, to a large degree depends on the words that come out of your mouth. Now, that's just one aspect, but it's a huge and very significant aspect. Your friendships, whether you have healthy, happy, lifelong friendships, or whether you have bitter, failed friendships or no friendships, and you end up lonely and miserable and pitiful with no one around you, to some degree, to a great degree, depend upon the words that come out of your mouth. And we can go on and on. All of your relationships are impacted by the words that come out of your mouth. Words are important. Words are powerful, and words can either bless or they can curse. They can either build up or they can tear down. Your words are important, and you need to take responsibility for your words. And if you want to have healthy, happy, satisfied relationships, fulfilling relationships, you need to choose your words carefully and choose words that help others and bless others and nurture the relationship. So let's start in Proverbs. Proverbs chapter 15. We're going to see 6 or 7 passages which talk about the importance of words, and then we're going to bring it home. Proverbs chapter 15, verse 1. A gentle answer turns away wrath. That's Proverbs 15, verse 1. And this proverb has had a huge impact upon my marriage and my relationships. A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. I have tried very, very diligently to apply this to my relationships and to my marriage. When there is some conflict, when someone is upset with you, don't raise your voice, and choose your words very carefully. Instead of responding with harsh words, respond with gentle words, with soft words, with positive words. This will do so much to diffuse the conflict and bring you to an understanding with the other person. Look at the second part of the verse. Harsh words stirs up anger. And that's too often what we do. We get upset and we use harsh words Harsh words come out of our mouth, and it stirs up anger, and the conflict escalates. The harsh words exacerbates the conflict, but a gentle answer will diffuse and soothe and bring the conflict under control so that you can gain your emotions again and be kind to each other and look for a solution. And too often the problem is you're not looking for a solution to the problem. Instead, you're attacking each other. That's a problem. Words. Your words are so important, and words of affirmation is a love language, a gentle answer. Verse 4. Proverbs chapter 15, verse 4. The soothing tongue is a tree of life, but a perverse tongue crushes the spirit. Look at the contrast. The tongue. Is your tongue a soothing tongue, or is your tongue a perverse tongue? We need to ask that question, because the soothing tongue is a tree of life. The perverse tongue crushes the spirit. Now let's jump to verse 26. Proverbs 15, verse 26. The Lord detests the thoughts of the wicked, but gracious words are pure in his sight. So if you want to be pleasing to the Lord, if you want to be pleasing to God, choose gracious words. Now let's go to Proverbs 16, verse 24. Gracious words are a honeycomb. Oh, I love honey. Gracious words are a honeycomb, sweet to the soul and healing to the bones. Think of honey. Honey's sweet. I crave honey. I enjoy putting honey on my biscuits. I enjoy putting honey in my oatmeal. Honey is sweet and it's delicious and it's natural. And it says here, gracious words are a honeycomb. Wow. So when you use gracious words, your words are like honey. They're sweet. And the people around you are lifted up. You're building people up. You're encouraging people. You're showing people kindness and sweetness. And people want to be around you. Words of affirmation are a love language. And here it also says they're a honeycomb. Okay, let's go to Colossians chapter 4, verse 6. Colossians chapter 4. Now we just saw gracious words are like honey. And here we're going to see that they're like salt. Honey and salt. What does honey and salt have in common? Well, the Bible talks about your words, when you use them wisely, when you choose good words, when you choose soothing words. It's like honey and it's like salt. Let's look at Colossians chapter 4, verse 6. Let your conversation be always full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone. Okay, your conversation. Here, the theme is how you speak, how you talk, how you interact with others, the words that you say to others. Let your conversation be always full of grace. That word grace is a word that's used for how God saved us. God saved us by his grace, his favor. And so we're talking about favor. We're talking about something positive. We're talking about something good and wonderful. Let your conversation be like God's grace, showing favor and kindness and goodness. And then it says seasoned with salt. Now, salt was used for preservation, but salt also is used for seasoning. And if something is bland, if you're eating a food and it is bland, well, there's a cure for that. You don't need to eat a food that doesn't have any taste and is bland. You can put salt on it. And salt is a seasoning that adds taste. And so when you use kind words, when you use good words and sweet words and uplifting words, it's like seasoning a food that doesn't have enough taste on its own. It enhances the flavor and it makes it taste good. And that's the way your conversation should be. Words of affirmation are a love language. When you speak kind words into someone's life, you're lifting them up, you're building them up, you're helping them. Words of affirmation do this. Now let's go to Ephesians chapter 4, verse 29, a very similar verse. Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. Words of affirmation. But first it talks about unwholesome words. And it says, do not let any unwholesome words come out of your mouth. Oh, I remember once when I said something in the 5th grade. I don't even remember what it was. but apparently it was something that wasn't good. And my fifth grade teacher, she took me in the restroom and she got a bar of soap and said, "You take a bite of this soap." And that's what parents used to say they're going to do. "I'm going to wash your mouth out with soap." Well, today that would be considered child abuse. And by the way, I just took a tiny bite of soap and she let me spit it out. It wasn't a big deal. But I will always remember that when my fifth grade teacher told me to take a bite of a bar of soap. And I did. Let no unwholesome word talk come out of your mouths. And see, that's the problem. It can damage our relationships. We get mad and we start calling names. People use filthy talk. Don't call names and don't use cuss words when you get into a conflict. Don't do that. Don't let your anger take control. You become irrational. It's irrational. That means you're not thinking. You've lost your senses. And so at that stressful moment when there's conflict, when someone's angry, don't let any unwholesome word come out of your mouth, because you can't take those words back. Once they come out of your mouth, you may be able to apologize, and you should. You should apologize. You may be able to say, "I'm sorry," and ask for forgiveness, and you should. But what you said most likely will not easily be forgotten. And there's a possibility that those damaging words, those hurtful words, those offensive words that you said will never be forgotten. They'll be engraved in that person's memory forever. And even though they want to forgive you, and even though they say, "I forgive you," they'll never be able to forget them. Let no unwholesome words come out of your mouth. Unwholesome words, offensive words, harmful words, damage relationships. They displease God, but they also damage relationships. And we're talking about words of affirmation. Now, the next part of the verse talks about words of affirmation, but only what is helpful. Are your words helpful? Only what is helpful for building others up. Do your words build up others? Listen to yourself. Do your words build up the people you love? Or are you unduly critical? Are you the critic, the ceaseless critic? Ask yourself that question. Look at the way you speak. Examine the words that come out of your mouth. Only words that are helpful for building others up according to their needs. Now think about this. Your talk, the words that come out of your mouth, shouldn't be to advance your own needs. They should be to build up others according to their needs. So ask yourself this question when you're talking to someone. What are the needs of this person that I love? And how can I use words, kind words, words of affirmation to build that person up, that it may benefit those who listen? So your words shouldn't just simply benefit you. Your words should benefit the person that hears you. Words of affirmation. It is a love language to speak kind words, uplifting words, complimentary words to someone. It is a love language. Okay, now I'm going to show you some examples of this. In 1 Thessalonians chapter 1, Paul is writing to the Thessalonians, and he builds them up. He compliments them. He commends them. He brags on them. In verse 7, 1 Thessalonians 1, verse 7, he says, "You became a model to all believers." Now, wait. Wouldn't that be great if the Apostle Paul said to you, "You are a model of what a Christian should be. You are a model of what it means to live a Christ-like life." Wouldn't that be a great compliment? You are a model. People should imitate you and follow your example, because you live an example of holiness and Christ-likeness. You are a model. Now, we're not talking about a glamour model like you see in the magazines or on TV. We're talking about a spiritual model, a model of holiness, a model of prayer, a model of faithfulness to God, a model of love, a model of living a Christ-like life. You are a model. Wouldn't that be a great compliment? That's what he said to the Thessalonians. And I can sympathize because Paul started that church in Thessalonica. Paul was the very first evangelist that went there and preached and started that church. And I look forward to not too long from now, I'm going to be traveling to Mexico, and I'm going to be visiting two of the churches that through God's grace and God's power, God used us as his instruments to start churches. And I'm going to be able to see those people and say to them, "You are a model. You have been faithful. You've lived lives of holiness. You have persevered. You are models. You are models of what it means to live a Christ-like life. Use your speech to affirm people. Use your speech to build people up. Now, granted, there's a time to reprove people. There's a time to exercise hard, tough love. There's a time and a place for that. But our predominant speech should be for edification and building people up. We only use the tough love when it's necessary. I don't like conflict. Now I can engage in it when it's necessary, but I don't enjoy it. I don't like it, and I want to avoid it. And so yes, there is a time for tough love and using words that are honest and words that will rebuke someone for their failure. There's a time for that. But my mode of operation, I want it to be words that lift people up, words that are kind, words that are complimentary, words that bless people. That's what I want to do. Paul says right here in 1 Thessalonians 1:7, you are a model. What a great compliment. And you read the whole context. He says many great things about them in this context. He was bragging on them. They were his spiritual children. Okay, now let's jump to John, the book of John, the Gospel of John, chapter 5, verse 9. And I want to see that here Jesus declares his love. Now, over in 1 John, don't turn to 1 John, but in 1 John it says, do not love in word only, but in deed and in truth. So it is absolutely true that words are empty if that's all you do is just say words and you don't demonstrate it with actions. So when we declare love, when we say I love you, we should also demonstrate it with actions, with sincerity, with deeds. So we shouldn't declare our love only in words, but also in deeds. But there's also a place for saying I love you. There's also that place for affirming your love for people, because you don't want to leave people guessing. There's so many situations, so many relationships where it is important to tell someone I love you. And we see that here in John chapter 15, verse 9. Jesus himself says it in past tense, but he says it. As the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Jesus says that. I have loved you. Now remain in my love. Jesus said it. I have loved you. Jesus stated his love for his disciples, for his followers. And I do believe that it's important that those who are important to us in our lives, that they hear those words, I love you. Now, that's especially important in marriage. In marriage, I think it should be a daily thing that you say to your spouse, I love you. It's important in family relationships that you tell each other, I love you. Granted, it must be from a sincere heart, and it must be demonstrated also by deeds, by actions. But it's important to say it. I love you. And in Philippians chapter 4, verse 1, we can see that Paul himself, and very similar to the Thessalonians passage, Paul established the church in Philippi. And so these were his spiritual children. He knew them and he loved them. In Philippians chapter 4, verse 1, Paul says it. Therefore, my brothers and sisters, you whom I love and long for, my joy and crown, stand firm in the Lord in this way, dear friends. You whom I love. Paul says it. I love you. I love you. So it's important also in spiritual relationships, in the church, to affirm our love, not just in word, also in deed. But there are times when it's important that we state it. I love you. Words are powerful. Words are powerful. And words are a love language, words of affirmation. Your words can build up and your words can tear down. Your words can bless and your words can curse. Your words can affirm love and your words can show hatred. Words can be kind and words can be unkind. Treat the people in your life that are important to you. Treat them with love and choose words of affirmation. It is a love language. There has been headlines in the news about how many police officers have been killed in the line of duty the last year and the last few weeks, and it's sad, it's tragic. It's happened in New York City, it's happened in Houston, and we read and we see on TV about funerals for police officers. And I want to say that I support law enforcement. No, not all of them they're not perfect, just like pastors are not perfect. And yes, there'll be times when police officers will make mistakes, and just like pastors and teachers and lawyers and everybody else will make mistakes. And yes, we should hold them accountable. But I do believe that the overwhelming majority of police officers love their job, and they want to help, and they want to serve. And they're serving because they have the right motives. Just a few weeks ago, there was a funeral for a police officer. His name was Jason Rivera in New York City. And his wife spoke at the funeral. Now, it was a headline that outside of, I believe it was St. Patrick's Cathedral, there was a sea of policemen, a sea of blue, not just thousands. It appeared to be tens of thousands of policemen on the street because they couldn't fit in the cathedral. They were on the street, just an ocean of police officers. And that was a big headline. And in fact, one Hollywood actress, famous Hollywood actress, stated a slur and said, "This is what fascism looks like." And she later regretted it and said she was sorry, to her credit. It's also a headline that in the funeral, when the widow spoke, she slammed the local DA for being soft on crime. And that's a big controversy across our nation. Many believe that too many district attorneys are soft on crime and they don't prosecute crime. But it's something that wasn't a headline is that she explained that on the last time she saw her husband, on the morning that he left to go to work and never would return, they got in a fight. And they said harsh words to each other. And then she heard later that day, they didn't reconcile, they didn't make up, they didn't fix it. He went off to work and they were both mad. And later that day, she heard on the news that 2 police officers had been shot and killed in Harlem. She started texting him, "Please, please, tell me you're okay. Tell me you're okay." But he wasn't. That was the end of his life. And sadly, the last time she saw him, they were mad and upset with each other, and they spoke harsh words. And she regretted that and stated it at her husband's funeral. Because she's only human, and she loved her husband, and she let the heat and the stress of a difficult moment get to her and lost her temper. And most of us, probably all of us, have done that. But it's a lesson for us, as she stated in her message at the funeral. We should show love to the people in our lives. We should express love. We should be forgiving. We should be kind-hearted, and our words should be filled with kindness and grace. Seasoned with salt, like honey. Our words should build up and not tear down. We should be forgiving and kind and loving. Words of affirmation are a love language. It's a way of demonstrating your love with words. Yes, they must come from a sincere heart, with sincere motives. And yes, words must be backed up with actions, with deeds that are consistent and support the words. But saying "I love you" is very important. Speaking words of kindness to people is very important. I like to say to people, "You're a blessing. You're a blessing." And I like to build people up based on the good things that they do. Words of affirmation are a love language. Okay, again, the 5 love languages are gifts. When you give gifts with sincere motives, it's a way of saying "I love you." Acts of service. When you help others by doing simple things, simple acts of service, it's a way of saying "I love you." Words of affirmation. When you use kind words, words that build up, words that show love, it's a way of saying "I love you." Next week, we'll look at spending quality time together. It's a love language. It's a way of saying "I love you." And then the 5th message will be appropriate physical touch. Affectionate physical touch is a way of saying "I love you." This is Pastor Mark Wright of Everest Road Christian Church. And again, I want to say to those of you who are quarantined, those of you who are traveling, those of you who for health reasons cannot be with us, we love you, we miss you, and we long for you to be with us again, and we're praying for you. God bless you.